So I forgot how to pause the darn thing. So now you're going to have two videos again because Daphne scared me. Um, what she's seeing is the Amazon truck in the court behind me. And she knows that the Amazon truck means that men come up to my door and do things that are scary, which is like throw packages on the door. Anyway, perhaps I thought to myself, I'm on page 394. It is a house of secrets and has no wish to be disturbed. There's the mystery in the house. And it's set back. She says, but I did not forget the woods of Menabili, or the house that waited, as if it had a life of its own. But the lure, down towards the bottom of page 394, but the lure of Menabili was upon me once again. Over on page 395, at the end of the second paragraph, this time there was no owl, but blackbird, thrush, and robin greeting the summer day. There's a blackbird. It reminds us of the raven. There's something mysterious about these blackbirds. I edged my way on to the lawn, and there she stood, my house of secrets, my elusive menability. It's personified. It's a she. Now, many of us do that. We might call our cars she. She's a good runner. Um, somebody in the class saw me driving. Oh, I think it was Sarah. Saw me driving my tractor. I might call her she every once in a while. My favorite toy. But she does the same thing, Du Maurier. The windows were shut fast, white and barred, ivy covered with the gray walls, and threw tendrils around the windows. The house, like the world, was sleeping too. And at the end of this paragraph, Menabelli would sleep on like the sleeping beauty of the fairy tale until someone should come to wake her. Isn't it? It's just really beautiful. Her personification of this and her identity with this building, this house. I watched her a while in silence, and then became emboldened and walked across the lawn and stood beneath the windows. The scarlet rhododendrons encircled her lawn to south and to east, to west. Behind her to the north were the tall trees and the deep woods. She was a two-storied house with the ivy off her would have a classical austerity that her present shaggy covering denied her. This is what Manderley looks like. So she certainly got it from her own experience. But if you go to page 396, but with all her faults most obvious to the eye, she had a grace and charm that made me hers upon the instant. Here's the mystery. She was, or so it seemed to me, bathed in a strange mystery. She held a secret, not one, not two, but many, that she withheld from the many people, but would give to one who loved her well. Maurier at the time hoped it would be her. She's like a sphinx, yet she had a personality that was hers alone, without the touch of a human hand. A few lines later, and out of these emotions she had woven a personality for herself. She had become what their thoughts and their desires had made her. So we've got two things playing here. Three, actually. This is the mysterious building. It's castle-like. It is deserted and covered in ivy. I'm sure you know what that looks like. But it is also a building with emotion and personality. It's got mystery. The house possessed me from that day, even as a mistress holds her lover. And at the top of page 397, at the end of the incomplete paragraph at the top, where was the laughter gone? Where were the voices that called along the passages, as if they are living memories? So she's looking in the window and she sees dust everywhere, the silence of death. And then she sees a great white owl, and a couple paragraphs later, some shred of convention still clinging to my nature turned me to respectability. I would not woo my love in secret. So she's trespassing and she knows it. So she wants to get permission. She no longer has to belly crawl there like a slinking thief. She wants to be legit in her approach to this house. Um, there were 16th century builders, merchants, and traders. There were the Stuart royalists who suffered for their king, the Tory land owners with their white wigs and their brood of children, and the Victorian garden lovers with their rare plants and their shrubs. Those are the creatures who lurk in this building, the memories. I remember when I sold my other house, um, a lady said to me, "How can you leave it? The memories are there." And I told her at the time, "No, they're not. They're in here." But I think Du Maurier sees these things in the house, in Menabelli. It is the house of secrets, she says on 398, the house of stories. A few paragraphs later, did I want anything? I wanted her, my house. I wanted every stick of furniture from the Jacobean oak to the Victorian bamboo. The house, had been left to die. Moisture everywhere, death and decay. I could scarcely see the soul of her for the despair. The mold was in her bones. So the thing had been left to die. But when we get to Manderley, we're going to see the same kind of imagery. I'm sure that you can picture this place from her descriptions of it. Moisture every, oh, we said that. Odd, yet fearful, what a few years of total neglect can do to a house, as to a man and a woman. Next paragraph. Sadder than either, more bitter and more poignant, it is a lonely house, setting up the mystery that we're going to see in Manderley, and reminiscent of the place where the eye speaker in the yellow paper is. She smelled something too. Something was dying without hope of being saved, and I would not stand it. She says at the end of the paragraph on top of page 399, I believe you will be able to rent Menabelly, but you must treat it as a whim, you know. The place is in a dreadful state. She said, but my own private war to live in Menabelly by that time winter came again. The whole thing was an impossibility in wartime, and the gods were on my side. Like fairy things, I said, and looking back after living here 2 years, it is just that, a fairy tale. I belong to the house, and the house belongs to me. So there is a mysterious connection between Du Maurier and Menabelli. And we're going to see the eye speaker in Rebecca observing Manderley, and we will hear the echoes of um, what Du Maurier says in this place in this chapter, House of Secrets. And I almost wish that this uh, portrait of Menabelli was in the beginning of the book rather than in the end, because it is so fundamental to Du Maurier's creation of setting. She says on page 400, slowly in a dream I walked towards the house. It's wrong, I think, to love a block of stone like this as one loves a person. It cannot last, it cannot endure. Um, Perhaps it is the very insecurity of the love that makes the passion strong. But she is not mine by right. The house is entailed, and one day will belong to another, so she can only rent it. At the end of the chapter, she says, and at midnight, when the children sleep and all is hushed and I sit down at the piano and look at the paneled walls, and slowly, softly, with no one there to see, the house whispers her secrets. Oh, she is the person who gets the secrets. And the secrets turn to stories, and in strange and eerie fashion, we are one, the house and I. So she has gotten inspiration from the house, and we get from it Rebecca. So the house actually becomes a character. She's personified it. Du Maurier calls her she, and it is a character. And it becomes a character in Rebecca. We'll see that the house becomes a representation of the people who live in it. So I have a note to myself, see the biography. Yes, it's always a good thing when I can find what I'm looking for. So this is a biography. It's just a quickie. And because I shut my video off, I kind of lost track of where my timing is. So I'm just going to tell you a few things about her biography. Next week, we are going to actually get into the story. Um, I knew that we were going to be a little slow on the draw because I found so much information. And remember that for a long time, Rebecca was um, relegated to B level fiction, but it is far more sophisticated. In fact, I remember in graduate school that someone had given me a copy of the collection by Du Maurier, and Jamaica Inn is one of them. And I was talking to a professor about it who said, "Ooh, that's not that good." But it is. It's great. Okay, so she writes thoroughly romantic historical novels inspired by her discovery of Cornwall, a rugged, windswept peninsula of southeastern England that was to be the setting for her most popular works. Her marriage to in 1932 to Major Frederick A.M. Browning and subsequently becoming the mother of three children created a conflict between her duties as wife and mother and her passion for writing. Wow. That's why I picked the yellow wallpaper. It was a conflict she resolved by spending as much time as she could on her own in Cornwall. Oh, here, let me just read you this. So, this is a biography. It's a biography of Daphne du Maurier by her daughter, and the daughter reiterates that point that um, Daphne du Maurier spent a lot of time in Cornwall gaining inspiration. So the daughter says, in Cornwall, she was to make her home, become at one with the beautiful, rugged countryside, and give to us a sense of belonging, us meaning the three kids. She fell in love with a decaying old house called Menabilly, and with strength and determination, she took a long lease upon the place, restoring it to its former glory. Gave Tessa, her sister, Kits, her brother, and me a magical environment in which to grow up. It was a lovely haven for my father on his return from the stresses of the Second World War, and in time, a retreat from the strain of London life. Um, the father was gone a lot because he was a soldier, and this is right in the middle of the war. So the daughter goes on to say, there were times when my mother was busy with her writing that I felt we were intruding upon her life. The days when she would sit tapping on the typewriter in her hut at the end of the lawn. Remember that Menabilly had outbuildings, little outbuildings, and when I was looking for to buy this house, you would I would come across places with outbuildings, and that was always kind of romantic. I almost sort of wanted one with an outbuilding. I didn't get one, but I don't care. She would be in a world of her own where we were not welcome. Her need for space, for freedom, was greater than her need for us. We would lose sight of her. She would become that far off figure in a never never land out of reach. She lived in distant times and places, peopled, peopled by the characters in her books, and they were beyond our childish comprehension. My father, and here we're seeing that conflict between her willingness to be a mother and her need to be a writer. My father would shrug his shoulders and sigh, and he would remark to us, your mother lives in a dream. And we would wait, biding our time, until that magic moment when suddenly she was with us once more, the faraway look gone, her lovely face alive with joy and laughter. And we would all forget in a trice that feeling of abandonment and rejection. Life would resume once more its hazy, lazy days of childhood. I think that was a really interesting view of Du Maurier because do I have a picture of her? Yes. Um, because you can see how she's torn by that conflict. Now, this is a picture of her with these kids, her kids. She's quite pretty, and those are the kids It's the oldest one who is writing this book. This is Tessa, and that is Kit's. Um, I love books with pictures. I'm just can't even help it. Let's see if I can find a quick picture of her. Otherwise, we're just going to move on because I want to finish some of this today. Um, wait. Oh yeah, here. She's clearly a woman of her time. Note the hair and the shape of the pants, but in the background is the desk where she would write, tapping on the typewriter. Okay, so um, she moved to Cornwall permanently in 1943 when she leased Menabelly, a crumbling old mansion on the coast that she had already used as the setting for Rebecca, which we know was published in 1938. Um, she she used the setting in others of her novels, Fisherman's Frenchman's Creek, Hungry Hill, The King's General. I have to be honest, I have not read those books. But I'm after having studied Du Maurier the way I have in the last several weeks, I think I probably will. Although the house was cold, drafty, and rat-ridden, she loved it, and her children bravely put up with it while Du Maurier continued to write successful novels, plays, and short stories. She became the first lady of Gothic romance fiction, a label she resented because she also wrote history, biography, and stage plays. When she did try something not Gothic, it was largely ignored. One of her most famous short stories is The Birds. That's the Alfred Hitchcock movie. Remember the birds? Yikes. The inspiration for the Alfred Hitchcock film. It's a haunting tale of intrigue, deception, and murder set. No, that's another one. Don't Look Now is that one. So, The Birds, just as in case you haven't seen the movie, it's a story of a malicious flock of birds. Makes you think that nature is malevolent. Du Maurier was a storyteller who had good stories to tell and knew how to tell them. It is this union of good plot and good style. Notice her style, the beauty of her imagery, that accounts for her enormous success as a writer of popular fiction. Her stories are products of a fertile imagination fueled by her love of history and her sense of place. She also, that's important, her sense of place. The element of mystery in a Du Maurier story depends even more on her fascination with the deceptiveness of appearances. Put that somewhere, write that down. The deceptiveness of appearances. In most of her works, things are never quite as they seem, and no one is above suspicions. Du Maurier's ability to tell a story is evident in the technique she uses to set the mood in the beginning lines. In deceptively simple language, she moves quickly into the story, not only establishing atmosphere, but also creating suspense. Often, she achieves the effect by using a first person narrator to give the story greater credibility. The technique of mixing answers to new questions is one she uses throughout to keep her reader turning the pages. What is it? The eye speaker asks. What is it? Nobody would tell him. In the opening lines of Rebecca establish the atmosphere so palpably that when Hitchcock made the film, he felt compelled to use a voiceover to achieve the same effect. Last night, I dreamt I went to Manderley again. The narrator says, it seems to me I stood by the iron gate leading to the drive, and for a while I could not enter for the way it was barred to me. Then, like all dreamers, I was possessed of a sudden with supernatural powers and passed like a spirit through the barrier before me. And therein lies the mystery. This is a dream that she returned to Manderley. Well, this is the story she's going to tell about Manderley. Um, Du Maurier was actually describing the first time she stumbled upon Manabelly, the neglected old country house in Cornwall that inspired Rebecca and in which Du Maurier later lived for many years. So intense was her feeling of Cornwall that she charmed language into making those feelings tangible. Um, yeah, that goes on about the birds. We don't need that. So let's see. Like many of Du Maurier's characters are as deceived about themselves as they are about others. That's the mystery again. More and first person speaker. So we're going to get her interior and her feelings and the questions she has, and then the answers that aren't true are accurate. And then an I speaker goes on. The narrator of Rebecca is an example. Her lack of self esteem is reflected in the fact that throughout the book she is known only as Mrs. De Winter, a name she shares with the first Mrs. De Winter, the legendary Rebecca. The second Mrs. De Winter is half her husband's age and thoroughly uncomfortable in his world. He is the wealthy, dashing lord of the manor, while she is the shy, penniless orphan, afraid of her own shadow. Here, Du Maurier is exploring the turmoil within a young girl who longs to feel liberated and equal, but who cannot escape the feeling trapped and inferior. That sounds like the character in the wallpaper, yellow wallpaper. Other characteristics that account for Du Maurier's enormous popularity are those commonly associated with the Gothic novel, a term used to describe a type of novel that reached its peak in the novels of the Bronte sisters, especially Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, which was published in 1847. The common ingredients are a remote country house, a poor innocent young girl, usually a governess, but not always, a brooding and mysterious older man, a sinister presence of some sort or other lurking in a remote part of the house. Although only Rebecca fits this mold, Du Maurier makes use of the Gothic atmosphere in so many of her other novels, including Jamaica Inn and Frenchman's Creek. Um, Her influence continues to be felt in such writers as Mary Stuart, Mary Higgins Clark, and Ruth Rendell. So I don't know if you, I don't really read much of that, but in my jail library, there are 2 boxes of books by Mary Higgins Clark. This almost makes me want to read it because, but the pages are all dilapidated and as such. So I'm pretty sure that I've run out of time. I'm not absolutely sure, but I think so. I think I'm at 1.5 hours and maybe over. We will go to the novel next week. So read, I said pages 1 through 64. I hope that gives you some insight into the sophisticatedness of the Gothic novels that had been kind of panned for many years actually. I told you about my experience in graduate school. So we will do that and start up next week. Remember that because Daphne barked, she scared me, and so there are going to be 2 installments of this. I will see you next week, and again, happy Valentine's Day. Oh, I should have worn red. I forgot. Well, in any case, the book is red. This book is red. Okay, I will see you next week.